look at just the OG&E contract, I've talked to a bunch of people in the city at this point, figure out what people's biggest concerns are, and the biggest one still.
Can you backtrack a little bit? I don't know, does everybody in the room at the table know about the franchise agreement that is up for renewal?
Yeah, on a scale of 1 to 5. Well,
This is just a main theft. Okay.
I can back up and look at it.
This is an agreement that's recycled every 20 years.
25 years. Yes.
And
Thank you.
You're recently opted out of it. Definitely, sorry.
Yes.
And
And the primary discussion
so OG&E has a really strong interest in keeping this
in place.
in place.
Absolutely.
And they kind of get to dictate the rules because.
Well, we'll hear from OG, get to OG in a few minutes, but I wanted to.
Yeah,
We have a
so
representative there.
the big discussion I think that's taken place, there's a lot of debate on people saying, well, we should do municipal utility and this and that. And it's been very clear that that's not where we're at. We're not ready to do that in any way. And I don't think our recommendations are at a point where we should try and abandon our partnership with OG&E. I think we need to just lay it out so it's best for what can change and evolve over the next several years. The biggest concern that's come up is the length of the contract, being 25 years. It's come up several times that at the very least, we should consider an opt-out clause at the 5 to 10 year mark so we can evaluate, one, our satisfaction with the contract at that point, but two, what's evolved technology-wise and what are some of the things we might want to amend to that contract.
It's my understanding, and maybe we'll get to it when James speaks, but the city of Norman can opt out at any time.
Well, that's not necessarily originally what the city council was given the impression of. And from my impression, they were also told that the opt-out clause isn't something we typically do, but that has also been kind of looked into and seen. It's been done before. James can maybe speak on that a little bit more and clarify, but do we have that option, James, to have opt-out at any point?
No, it's not an opt-out clause in the OG&E franchises. The thing that the franchise does is it doesn't restrict you from doing anything you want to do.
Right.
I mean, the city, the clause does not require the city not do this, not do that, or anything you wanted to do. We would consider ourselves a partner to get to wherever you want to be.
Right.
We've done projects with other cities where we partnered to do different things. So I kind of feel like you need a utility company to make happen some of the things that you want to try to do.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of these things are funding intensive. You have to have connections with people and volumes of people to make them pay out and do what they need to do. So I think it's important that whatever you do, you would probably want to partner with. The advantage Norman has is they've got two utilities, OEC and OG&E, and both are responsive or open to these types of things. So I think for our part of it, the agreement that I think you had the one occasion, Jones, Oklahoma, I was actually the person involved in that, and that ended up being a non-event. They're on a 25-year deal.
Right.
It was something done previous years that really, if they wanted to do something, they could do anything. OG&E is not going to prevent the city from doing anything.
Right.
No, but go ahead, carry on with your.
Could you clarify what the significance of Jones is? I mean, what happened, or?
I think at one point in Jones, Oklahoma's career, they thought at some point that they would be putting information on power lines. Power line carrier was kind of a big thing, and they thought maybe, well, in 5 years we'll be able to charge people, or OG&E will have to pay us. If people are, if we're sending cable TV down our power lines, you know, they'll have to pay us on that.
Right.
But our agreement is for electricity, not for cable or anything like that. We transmit electricity.
Right.
We don't transmit anything else. So we don't have any interest in Norman other than transmitting and selling electricity.
Don't you charge Cox Cable for using your right of ways and your utility poles?
For the franchise utilities in Norman, we all have franchise agreements with the city. We have joint pole agreements. If we put in a 40-foot pole to make our clearance, if Cox or somebody wants us to put a 50-foot pole to allow them to clear, they pay us for the 10-foot. So that our customers, you, our OG&E customers, don't pay the extra 10-foot. Let their customers pay that.
Do they pay one time, or is it recurring kind of pole rental?
It's a pole, it's a event, per event.
It's capital cost
Okay,
of the
per
bond.
event.
Gotcha.
But were you talking about the Jones issue was sharing, it sounded like you were saying their issue was sharing like the same line, you have power and call it
There
that,
was a
running through
thought-
the same wire, not the pole sharing.
Right,
It was
I
two
think we're
different
talking
wires.
about two different things.
Right, okay, yeah, that's.
The thing, and, you know, the power line carrier thing, that wasn't gonna work.
You can't, you only run power through your lines, that issue was running power and data through one wire.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what they were wanting to do. They thought at some point the technology was gonna be that you could take your cell phone, I mean, not your cell phone, but your landline, your cable, and run it through our power lines. And we were gonna be billing people for that. And the city was trying to make sure they got their cut. That was what that was all about. That's not, you know, fiber optics and all that stuff is a better way to do any of that kind of thing, data, you know, but, you know, so it was a non-event, but at some point, we did that. It was a big deal to get it undone, but future councils had to handle that, so.
You wanna go ahead?
Yeah, but to speak to your point, I think you're right about the importance of a utility company. I think it also could be important with such a long duration of a contract to kind of keep the fire under them a little bit to keep our satisfaction. I think that's another reason that 5-year clause is really important, because you're right, we can still do a lot of stuff as a community, but I think it's more important that it encourages OG&E to be transparent about, one, all of the different activities, some of the progress they're making, and to listen to what we are requesting a little bit more so once they have a 25-year contract. It's very easy right now for us to go through this back and forth and debate what we want, and we get the impression we might get it, but once we have a 2.5-decade agreement, who knows how much we can actually get out of that. And I think the 5-year opt-out at least allows it to always be a discussion if we're getting what we're saying, and if they're giving us what they've said. So that's a big discussion that things come up just because it's something we don't have, and it's something that, again, with the rapid transitions of what's happening, to back up, I still think the most sustainable thing that needs to be done is we need to work our way to a municipal utility. It's not necessarily possible right now with state legislation. I think there's a lot more that needs to be done for us to get there. But I think it's important that this agreement be laid in place, that when we're ready to do that, it's very easy to do that, and we can kind of work hand in hand with what we have as an agreement.
Let me interrupt you.
Yes.
Just to backtrack, so that the board knows,
Mhm.
okay? This has already been through first reading at council. It was on the consent docket, which is normal for first reading, so there was no public comment. Tuesday, in 6 days, it will be second reading, which, and when I say reading, it's an ordinance to send this franchise agreement to a vote of the people, which always has to happen. So that's what I'm talking about. That's what the council is voting on, to send it to a vote of the people in November. So that's what second reading is. Public comment will be allowed on Tuesday because it will not be on the consent docket. But we are, the timeline is tight, super tight. This is in the middle of first and second reading, so.
Can I ask a point of information? What relevance and what oversight does this group have over this vendor decision-making process of the council?
I don't know how much we have oversight over the actual decision, but I think it is being our focus on environmental control and some of these specific action items being our focus, that this is definitely pertinent to us having a suggestion in place, or at least a stance on some of these items. I don't think necessarily we are the primary decider on what we think the city council should do, but I think because of what this committee is, our stance is important, if that makes sense.
Well, your role is to advise by name.
I understand,
Council.
I'm looking for, they're also, we're not to advise just in general. We have a particular mission,
Right.
and I'm trying to fit what our mission or purpose is.
So you would generate,
To your point.
potentially generate a recommendation to council from this meeting.
The action item he is working on is to encourage renewables and energy efficiency.
I mean,
So that's the
I
tie-in
get that,
thing.
but,
We have a We
But just-
haven't let him get to the renewables part yet, because
Keep
we keep
interrupting him.
interrupting him.
Well, and I get it, but I haven't yet understood why we're listening to this, so I'll shut up and let you keep talking.
While he's already interrupted, point of clarification on the city council
Yes.
second reading. It's, when you said it has to go to a vote in November, if city council approves, is it approves agreement as stands to go to the people, and that agreement as stands does not have the 5-year?
Yes.
Right.
As of now, right. There are no amendments or changes to that franchise agreement that OG&E put forward to the city of Norman.
It is an agreement that we have with 276 communities. It's a
It's
standard
just a
agreement, it's an
renewal.
agreement that we have.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no magic to this agreement. It's just how we get our electricity to your meter and how we operate in the city. It has more to do with our operation and our interaction with other utilities. When we do a utility easement, OG&E has got the bottom 3 foot or whatever of the ditch. OEC, ONG, AT&T, Cox is how we operate. When there's a major storm in Norman, we all, as franchise utilities, we operate together and we do what we need to do, get things done. So it's more of an operation. Some of the things that we're talking about are regulated items for us. We're regulated by the state of Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. So we do renewable projects, a project that we just did, just started this month, I think, Covington, Oklahoma, solar farm. That plant has to be approved by the Oklahoma Corporation Commission before we can go forward. Any of the wind farms that we've done have been approved by the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. And I'm sure all that can be verified by people in the room that have gone there and heard the testimony and those type of things. So it's important for us as a utility in Norman to have the ability to operate in and around the city, in the right of ways, setting poles, removing poles, stringing wire, digging ditches and all those type of things to provide good quality service for every 47,000 customers that we have here in Norman. It's important for us to be able to get to those and provide the service. And it is a vote of the people. The last time we did this 24 years ago, it was a 90+% positive vote. OG&E, if you look around the city, we're probably one of the most visible utilities. We're probably one of the most involved. I say we are the most, but if we were one of the most involved utilities in Norman, in schools, in nonprofits, in businesses, in churches, and we have 134 families that are tied to OG&E that live in Norman. I don't know how many people can say
Excuse me,
that.
I need to say something. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
I really, really disagree with the way this process is going. You are a member of the public, as am I. You had a seat at the table with the whole city council to make your case for a study session a few weeks ago. This is supposed to be a discussion, and I appreciate that you want him to make his own case. But this is the Environmental Control Advisory Board, where you guys are supposed to discuss amongst yourselves some suggestions, including the one that Andrew has brought here. I think it's very legitimate for this gentleman to want to talk amongst yourselves about this and not have to go to
I can
him to
leave.
make
I mean,
his-
I was invited, so I can leave.
Excuse me, I'll just tell you that
I can leave.
we operate with giving all the information, both sides. And yes, we want Andrew to finish what he was saying, because we've all gotten to talk a little bit, and he still hasn't finished getting his initial point out, which is why I turned it over to him in the first place. And yes, we will have a discussion, but we don't have a discussion without presenting the facts to the board. And that's the purpose of this exercise, and OG&E has facts to present as well. So this is our process, and this is what we do before any educated decision can be made. So I just want to acknowledge your comment and what our plan is. Andrew, do you want to continue, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And James, I do appreciate you giving your insight. It gives us a lot of information I think we can use. And to back up to your point too,
And one clarity,
yeah.
the deal in Bethany, that was not rejected.
What did happen? Can you clarify that
I'm
real
curious.
quick?
Their city manager and mayor did not put it on the agenda. They refused to put it on the agenda.
Right.
To take it to a vote of the people. I think hopefully 2 weeks from now that happens. They
Gotcha.
had a meeting last night, and the thought is that 2 weeks from now, they're gonna get it on the agenda for the
Right.
first reading.
And just clarify for me, the biggest difference between our situation right now is our contract doesn't expire until next year. Has theirs already expired?
Yes.
Okay. That's
So
what,
they're actually in violation of state law.
right, so now they're in the process of figuring out what they're gonna do next. And
It would be
possibly
great if
to
they
say
had a plan.
re-vote on it, yeah.
That's just
Okay.
a personal.
Okay, thank you for that insight too. But to clarify on your point again, I think, the renewable energy topic is important, and the majority of the rest of this document is specifically about renewable energy. I think more so what we're talking about is the environmental control aspect and our insight on how we manage the businesses and people working with us. And OG&E being a very big, very long-standing citizen that works with us as a community to provide what we need. I think just evaluating as an environmental control board how they responsibly do that and provide the biggest concerned citizens to provide it. Again, I did most of these three things that I've repeatedly heard from citizens. I didn't just make them up myself. And I'm not from Norman, so I had to get a lot of insight on this. So I think that's why I mainly think this is important, because it's about environmental control. To that second point is where I'll just go ahead and move to, is one of the more heated ones I think people have seen letters to the editor about and so forth, is the chemical tree spraying. I've talked to several groups outside of Norman and outside of the state of Oklahoma. I've talked to my friends, the sustainability coordinator for Orlando, and they don't consider that something that's necessary to remove trees. They have their own protocols that do not involve chemical spraying. You can do that very manually, and it might cost a little bit extra, but in their minds, it's much more worth it. And it's important that, it's been thrown around a couple of different options there, but in my mind, I think the chemical spraying is necessary. I think they should and can consider other alternatives to taking care of the tree situation, and then obviously increasing the warning notice. We've definitely had complaints of people suddenly having damaged trees and so forth. I don't think I need to go into that one too much unless anybody has questions on it. Good on that one. And then the last one on there was discussed as an option to help us move towards a better budget that can help us move towards some of these alternatives. And one of the things you sit in the city council and you learn is that our budget's tight as a city. And it was discussed as, well, our franchise agreement is the 3%, and James, I'm assuming that's probably the default for all the cities, is a 3%
It's 3%
franchise
for
agreement.
everybody. It's the
Yeah.
same.
And I was told that we have a credit that for municipal energy generation that covers roughly 7 to 9 months or so of our year.
About 10
And
months.
it was recommended that we increase that to cover all of the municipal needs for the year. Those are the 3 recommendations I have for OG&E's contract that I have discussed with multiple Norman citizens.
So on that credit, by the way, we were not asked to, this was requested by Andrew, we were not directed by council to work on this, but we had a board member request the item. But on that credit, and this might be to both of you, could the city purchase renewable? I know that OG&E is sold out of renewable credits at this moment, but have more coming online fairly soon. Could the city use that credit towards renewable credits as OU does? They do all renewable credits.
That is an option. It's wind. That's what we have available. I learned today that our solar plant that we're building in Covington is already sold out. We had a customer that took the first half and then the rest with our waiting list and all that, so that's done. But there are wind. There is wind energy that is available to be able to use for the 5.5 million kilowatt hours that the city of Norman gets free per this franchise agreement. That's something that my management is working on. I thought I could maybe say that as a fact tonight, but that's not a fact just yet, but hopefully it will be by Tuesday night when we talk about it. But that's something that we would offer to all of our customers, municipal customers. The free kilowatt hours that we give to the city, we could give those in the form of renewable energy. And for Norman, Oklahoma, it does cover about 10 months of the year for this building and for the fire station.
Right, not the water and wastewater, because
No, that's
very
too
high
much.
users, yeah,
No,
very high
that's, that's,
Well, I just want to
you're
clarify
gonna
that,
need
because
more
those are,
than what we've got generated.
Yeah, the 10 months is this facility, this
Yeah.
whole facility, and the
And
fire
it
stations.
is true that that number is calculated by 0.5% of the kilowatt hours that are sold in Norman whatever that total is, a 0.5% of that is calculated and allotted to the city for the coming year to use throughout. And generally it takes Norman about 10 months to use that up, and then they pay for the last 2. There are cities that pay no bill to OG&E for their fire and all that because they don't have enough to use up. All you gotta have is a couple good industrials in your town city limits, and you can do pretty good with that.
You know, the last meeting, this is kind of odd, but we had a speaker that sold solar. He said that if OG&E or ONC put solar panels on a municipal facility, you would get a tax credit of 50%. That maybe you could pass on to
Who would get that?
OG&E would get the tax credit. Isn't that what?
30%.
30%? Okay. So is there
That we
something?
would?
Yes.
Federal rebate on infrastructure, 30%. Are you guys capitalizing on that?
I don't know that that's how we operate. I mean, I don't know.
Right, yeah, so that might
I
be
mean, I
a
know,
question for somebody else. then.
Yeah, because I didn't know if that would be something that they would be interested in doing and then just charge, you know, because obviously government can't get a tax credit because we don't pay taxes.
Well, it would be also us putting our facilities on somebody else's building that I
Or
don't know.
rent it. Well,
Right.
I think it's,
I don't know that that's,
we discussed that last week,
There's
that
a lot
you,
of
that you actually
liability
rent the,
involved
I mean, I don't know about that. I'll have to ask somebody. 'Cause
Okay.
I can't answer that. I will tell you that, I'll offer this. Our 2.5 megawatt plant at Mustang, Oklahoma, if this group ever wanted to go tour that and take a look, we've got it set up to where you can see the meters and what they're putting out and what they're doing. There's several groups in Norman that have gone up,
Right.
to tour that, so it might be an interesting thing to see.
Is that the
We
solar
have the one that
panel?
moved, do it now?
Is that the solar panel farm?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Have you been there? Have you seen it?
I've ridden by it.
Okay, if you guys ever wanna go tour that, it's a pretty neat deal. You know, it's kind of funny because there is a gas plant in the background, you know, a Mustang plant, but, so you may have to block that out.
One more question, is there anything OG&E is doing specifically to move towards homeowners being able to have solar panels on their house, or provide for your members? Or just the solar fields and wind fields?
The only thing we're authorized to do is a utility grade solar.
Okay.
We're not, I mean,
Rebates.
at some point, if it was viable,
and the two rebates.
we might get into that,
Yeah.
but.
In
Who
theory.
authorizes, is this back to the Corporation Commission, which is a 3-panel committee appointed by the governor? Right?
Yeah, well, no, hold up, and it's also important to remember that we're getting into somebody else's market. You know, there's certain electrical things we don't do because it infringes on electrical contractors in their city. So there's restrictions put on us to where we can only operate here, and locals do the rest. So we're regulated more than most people would think we are.
Matt, did you have a question?
Yes. So the franchise fee of 3% is collected from all of your customers,
Yes.
and then that money comes back into the city.
It goes to the general fund of the city to the tune of $2.7 million a year.
And so, but that's that, and then there's also the power, the 10 months of power, whatever. So there are two different things. Okay.
And I will say this, there's only one utility that does that. You can guess who it is.
Thank you.
I mean, nobody gets free phone service, no cable, no.
Andrew, so
Yes.
my question to James about using that credit that the city gets every year towards renewable credits, I mean, what is your thought on that?
My first thought was, since it's only 0.5%, and that's covering the majority of the year, right? Or is that what you said, 0.5%?
0.5%.
Would it be plausible to go up to 0.75%, so the rest of the year's covered?
No. You know, it was not, I mean, because what it does, it grows as the city grows. As Norman grows, it grows with the city. That number goes up with the city, the franchise fee goes up. I mean, it's a
The
way to
flip side
run
of that is
utility, if you ask
if we
me.
could be 20% more efficient, it would go the whole year.
Right, that's
There
true.
you go.
Very true.
There you go. And I was gonna say, when you guys were talking about those variable speed drives, I used to do that stuff for OG&E. That's one of the best technology ever been created for heating and air, water pumping, all that, where you control the motors electronically rather than valves and all that. So that was a good, whoever come up with that idea had a good one.
To Eli's point about conservation,
Yeah.
and kind of having to do with your action item as well.
Mhm.
You know, isn't there some sort of energy audit that we could do, or the city could do? Do you all do energy audits, James, or is that something you hire somebody else for?
Somebody else does it, and back in my past history, we used to do manufacturing industrial facilities, but we don't do that
Okay.
now.
So could the city do an energy audit? Because, I mean, I just think conservation is low-hanging fruit,
Yeah.
you know, that everybody
Save
could do
a lot.
better on, right?
It is.
So, I don't know if that's Andrew's action item or falls under Debbie's, but
James, could you work with us on that?
the
Help us
long-term
identify where we
request for an
can,
energy audit is my point.
how we
Right,
can
yeah,
stretch that
absolutely.
10 months to 12?
Yeah, yes, we can do that. We've done that with customers, not only us, but OEC does the same thing. That,
Are there smart meters in all the municipal buildings? I'm looking at that thermometer on the side over here.
no, there's smart meters in every,
Yeah.
So you can help us with data for
Yeah.
where we're being wasted.
and I will tell you this, and I had this little story prepared for you guys. No, at OG&E, you know, we recognize Norman as a energy conscious, environmental, friendly city. The trees, all that, we recognize that at OG&E. You were our first smart city. That's when we came to do our smart meters, we came to Norman first. And a few years ago at Lincoln Elementary, Ms. Solvick's class, we do these junior achievement projects. And one of the kids did a recycling project. Their project was recycling. And then we vote on the project, which one's the best. And there was some sports stuff, and there was some gaming stuff. And you know, me being 50-something years old, thinking how kids think, I thought it would be the gaming, and then the sports, and then the recycling. It was a unanimous vote for the recycling project.
Yeah.
And I never would have guessed that, but our young people are picking up on this early, which I think is the best forward-thinking thing we can do, is to talk to young people about these type of things, because it gets to be a part of their life. You know, the programs that OG&E does in the schools of fourth grade, because that's where it sticks. You know, they're not sarcastic yet, but they take it as gospel and go with it. So when you talk about power lines and safety and all that kind of stuff, they know and they recognize it. So I was impressed by that.
Yeah.
And I think it's never happened anywhere else that I've been, but
Yeah.
Counselor, can I ask a question? I'm still trying to catch up. So clearly, our job is to think about renewable energies, things, et cetera. Is the coincidence of this contract kind of what's brought this to bear?
Yes, I'd say I feel truly that this contract can have an impact on what I'm trying to plan, but also I think there's priority with the fact that direct citizens have come just saying, hey, this committee needs to address some of the environmental concerns with what OG&E's done and make sure it's protected in the next contract. So again, I know it's not our decision, City Council didn't assign this to us, but the citizens of Norman seem very clear that the different committees that have any relevance to this should be voicing at least a certain opinion, because this is very important to the long-term trajectory of what we're trying to do. And whether we're talking just about the renewable energy and utilities, or we're talking about the environmental control, I think it goes hand in hand and plays into both roles.
So is it that we're concerned that there's not a renewable component in this agreement?
I think, honestly, these three things that I have in here, that first one is to help us try and start creating them, because I don't think there's enough renewable component to this at all. The other two, or that middle one, is much more environmental control, and it's just been brought up over and over again, and so I wanted to include it in all.
And the spraying.
The spraying, yes.
James, can you comment on the spraying, or what, do you have anything to say
we're
about the spraying?
not spraying anything in Norman
At all.
at all. We're not spraying anything.
You have,
We have, yes.
so you're not anymore?
We've suspended that
Oh, okay.
effort.
Can you tell us when you suspended that?
Just recently.
Okay.
Today?
No, shortly after the news article.
Afterwards. Fair enough.
I'm just being frank with you, right?
Well,
Can I do that? Can I do that?
Better late than
Excuse
never.
me,
But because, excuse me,
suspended implies it could be restarted. Have you eliminated it?
no, we haven't eliminated. We're reassessing what we're going to do and how we're going to do. in Norman, Oklahoma, and I'm going to make a statement. I've got a statement that our lawyers are clearing for me on that particular item. The items that you guys are talking about, I'm aware of them. We're going to try to make sure we get a statement made about them. We do have to be able to manage vegetation. Lights blinking. I saw J.C. Watts at the sports banquet the other night, and we're famous for, he's preaching at the First Baptist Church in Norman, and PowerPoints while he's finishing his sermon. This happened maybe 5-6 years ago. And we always talk about that every time we see each other, but he kept going. So trees and things like that are a concern for us.
Yeah.
We want to follow all of the rules and all of the environmental friendly Tree Line USA and some other things that are out. We're going to always follow those type things.
Right.
Some of the things that we are using, we feel that they are environmentally friendly, but in Norman, Oklahoma, maybe not perceived as that.
Right.
So you're saying you're not necessarily ending it because, or suspending it because you think that it is harmful, but because you think that it's perceived as harmful?
He needs to get back to
Is-
the lawyers.
No.
We're gonna be respectful to everybody in there,
Okay.
because we're all here having a discussion, and we're
I'm
gonna
just-
continue to be
Yeah,
respectful.
just to kind of wrap up my point, in no way am I against our partnership with OG&E or against the company as a whole. I have no vested reason to be against them. I'm just trying to look out for the best interest of the community and the things that have been brought up. I do appreciate you being here, though, to help be a part of this conversation, because being present helps and shows that you care. And I do appreciate you guys at least suspending the program, because it's better late than never. And it has been brought up, and it shows you guys are listening. So, James, I do appreciate you trying to answer some of our
Yes.
questions tonight.
I think we're in the weeds on the, no pun
Yeah.
intended on that. I think it's, I think we can all agree there's a way they can probably work it out without the chemicals, and
But that can't go into the contract
Move
without
on.
changing the rules you have for 200 some odd communities, is that right?
There's no rules in our franchise agreement about.
Right now, yeah. I think that was
There's nothing in there that says any the things that we're
Without that,
discussing
yeah.
are not in that. That's why I say the city of Norman restricted full cutoff lighting. That's a requirement. We couldn't meet that with our equipment, so we don't do lighting in Norman for commercial lighting, because our fixtures don't meet the requirement. That's not us making, that's the city that determines that.
You're talking about commercial lighting, though, you're not talking about streetlights, correct? I mean,
Yes.
there's a difference,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
So if the city decides that they don't allow, do allow, or whatever, that's on them to do. We operate within the rules of the city. There's nothing in this contract that says we have to, or the city can't, or none of that. We talk about distributing electricity to your residents is basically what we're trying to get done.
So city council could pass a resolution that says no chemical spray.
There's people that have said,
That would be separate from this franchise agreement, I mean, it would be, yeah.
It's been suggested
They have to abide by it.
it sounds like
or
it's
what I would prefer,
But
what
that's
I would
It's
prefer
immaterial
if
to the
you would do
franchise
that,
agreement.
is to make sure, everybody understands, if you don't do this, we still have to keep the right of way clear.
Right, absolutely.
By trimming or some method.
I got a goat you can borrow.
But yeah, whether that's,
Those are good.
and again, I think these points are brought up just as mainly concerns whether they could be addressed directly in the agreement or kind of parallel to with other ways city council addresses it with an additional ordinance. I just wanted to bring up those three concerns
I
because
mean, I
that's
think
what
that's
they brought up.
valid, we have a current city council person sitting in the room, I'm sure she's taking note of those things being said. I'm typing as fast as I can. So.
Does anybody else have any questions?
What happens if the vote, okay, let's say city council says, okay, it's gonna go to the voters, contract as stands. Then what happens if the voters vote no? Like, is it like the stormwater thing, like you're back to where you started, like what?
Is that for me?
I have no idea. Anybody that can speak to it, but
The
citizens
only
votes
thing,
no.
the only thing I can say is that we've never had that happen. we've been a franchise utility in Norman, Oklahoma for 90+ years. Other utilities in the city, I don't know of any that's had a rejection, because when you boil it down to what we're actually talking about, everybody wants their power to their house in some orderly fashion. That's what we all want. We want to know that if they widen the street, all the utilities that have a franchise with them are gonna move, and at no cost. That's a big benefit to the city. That's something that the state law gives to the city that it doesn't give to the county, and it doesn't give to the state. If we move our poles for the county, they pay us. If we move it for the state, they pay us. AT&T, all that.
Just so you hear what James just said, if we decide to widen the street, 24th Avenue, east side is gonna be widened from Lindsay to Robinson. Part of it already is. They're gonna take all their poles, all their superstructure, everything, and just move it out of the way. That includes going out and acquiring property or easements or right-of-way necessary to relocate it. I mean, that's what we get in addition to the 3% money they pay us, so.
Well,
That
Of
our
course,
rate
the
payers
water
pay.
and sewer utility is gonna do the same thing. It's our money that used to be your money.
Yeah, there's no
Yeah, there you
plan,
go.
the city has no plan B, I mean, basically.
Gas generators at every home emitting all kinds of carbon footprint.
I mean,
Right.
you're
Well,
free to do
you
that.
know, you can put conditions on it.
No, you're free to do that.
Or
If
ask
there's new
council to.
technology comes out, you're free to,
You know,
I mean, we're not coming to
consider
your
it.
house telling you what you can and can't do.
And this is from my own ignorance, because I haven't seen this agreement, so I don't know fully what's in it. So one of the points was introducing more renewables into the city.
Yeah.
Okay, and one of the other points was the concern of the spraying or whatnot. So those two things, though, are not governed by this agreement. Like, for example, so nowhere in that agreement does it say anything about renewables or anything about spraying,
Not at this point, no, at all.
but anywhere in the state.
Anybody's agreement.
So those things can be, the spraying, as we talked about, can be addressed through council and resolutions or ordinances or whatever.
Right.
And it's also important to know, council can amend this agreement if they want to, because it is written as an ordinance. There's no signature line for OG&E. It's not a contract. It is, the council just has to vote and approve it, and then it would be sent off. But technically, I mean, it can be changed.
Well, and also too, I wanna make the point, OG&E is not the only utility or government entity that sprays,
Yeah.
right? I
Right.
mean, I would imagine the city probably sprays, and, you know, there's other, so you can't just lay all the spraying bad stuff on them. I just wanna say that, by the way. So, if an ordinance is done, you gotta take into consideration everybody that sprays.
Yeah, especially.
Which, by the way, I'm all for that, but.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate everything that you listed. I've just had a difficult time figuring out how.
Which
parlays
where's the
into
list?
Franchise agreement.
Am I looking at the list?
It's just all through.
Oh, it's
The renewable energy, I think that's all wonderful, but I'm not certain, I've been having a hard time connecting, I think Matthew was saying the same thing, connecting with this vendor agreement.
Contract, right.
Now, a resolution for the things you talked about, these sorts of the city, I think those are wonderful ideas, don't get me wrong, I've just had a hard time figuring out the connectivity of this franchise, other than the timing and coincidence.
Right, that makes sense. And again, I think this is, I should have probably clarified, these aren't necessarily things that go directly into that ordinance that's written as a contract, but it is stuff that goes hand in hand, whether it's addressed in other ways, like we're saying, so.
I completely understand.
I have a
do
question.
understand it's not
Yeah.
necessarily.
So this is not a contract that we're entering into
It's an
between the
ordinance.
city and OG&E. It's a city ordinance.
Kate,
It's
can you
being
clarify that
passed
a
to
little bit?
dictate.
Yeah, that seems, we tried to press that point in our study sessions, and the answer seems to be slightly unclear. It is written as an ordinance, there is no signature line for OG&E on that, but according to the city attorney, there still is some buy-in that OG&E needs to have with that agreement.
Right.
Mr. Chappell might have
I think
more insight in that. But
the
it is-
ordinance is really to send it to the vote, people,
That's-
correct? It's not an ordinance,
Right.
yeah, that's what the ordinance
Once
is.
people vote, then that's the decision's been made. whether to
Once the
enter
people
into the
vote,
agreement.
the city will get a letter from OG&E saying that we recognize the will of the people and we're gonna abide by the terms of the agreement. And it authorizes us to do what we do. It authorizes, the city to be able to do what they do and expect what, from all their utilities. It allows, our partner utilities in Norman to know how we operate. There are utilities in Norman that are not franchised utilities. They don't operate the same with us as ONG, AT&T, OEC, and those guys. They have a lot of things that we do, they pay. There's no mutual, anything like that happens. So it's an advantage to the city to have us working together.
Did you have a question, Matt?
Yeah.
You trying to talk? Sorry.
Under 1 to 5 year objectives, third one, it talks about evaluate all possible methods to finance the purchase of infrastructure and controlled by OG&E.
Right.
So, to put Mr. Chappell in the spot, because he loves it, if the city were interested in either buying it or replacing it, you know, let's assume they cost the same amount of money, but let's for the moment. In a ballpark guess, what is that number?
Let me give it to you this way. I had a banker ask me this the other day. Newest substation, Millennium Substation, is at Rock Creek Road and 12th Avenue. That's a $4 million investment. This year for downtown Norman and some of the things that we're doing down here. A year or so ago, we put a $1.2 million transformer in it. There's a substation there, $4 million. Then we put a $1.2 million investment into that. We built 2 feeder lines, overhead, underground lines to get power moved around where we need infrastructure, $500,000 a shot. We spent about $22 million over the past 3 years. We spent $23 million in Norman, Oklahoma on projects and things like that. There's 8 substations that we operate here in Norman.
So citywide, feeder lines to the
I
line
think
windows.
I think you're talking hundreds.
Not of millions.
Yeah, hundreds of millions.
You think we're above 5?
Oh, I don't know. I won't say that. I mean, because I don't know. I'm just using that as a ballpark.
Hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted, to that point, Matt, I just wanted to offer a couple of I know you're not suggesting we take over our own utility right now.
Right.
We'll have more discussion on that when we get to the recommendation portion. But I just wanted to offer a couple of my personal thoughts on that. We can't get our citizenry to approve a fairly modest stormwater utility that is environmentally friendly. That's one point. Can you imagine how much more electric would cost and to buy all that infrastructure if we're running our own utility? My other point to that is, I personally would never support it as long as the city has in their charter that we have to vote on utility rates. It would keep us totally from doing business. I mean, so I think those are some hang-ups that maybe in 10, 20, 30 years, whatever, we can get past. But those are my immediate concerns today as far as us running our own electric utility. We're not there, period. So that's just my own editorial comments.
We have people that think city water service is a scam, that like the city's literally scamming people like by jacking up their water bill. I mean, it's like,
They don't think that yet. Please don't say that out loud.
well,
But they did approve a very
No, read it.
substantial
There's
water
about
rate increase less than 2
75
years ago.
comments on.
I don't care
really
what comments are out there,
understand.
70% of people voted in favor of a very substantial water rate increase
No, but I'm
less than
saying
2 years ago.
to
So they
Amanda's
don't believe
point,
we're scamming them.
people
No, he's
don't-
not.
Not happening.
No, he's not saying that you are. That's not.
I'm
what
not
he's
saying
Charlie.
that. I'm not saying you are. I'm
Yeah.
saying there's people that
He's-
think.
Yes.
Talking about
city.
75
That's
people out of
different.
110,000, that's
That's-
not significant.
Well, that's
Anyway, go ahead.
anyway. That I
Sorry.
think that's a big.
Yeah,
That's
it's
a big
very,
problem.
we mentioned that before. I think it's just that difficulty of picking stuff up.
Yeah.
What's
I mean,
the
it's
scenario?
tough.
Absolutely.
So the 5-year opt out. So like, what's the scenario in let's say OG&E agrees to that?
So
And-
there's been a couple scenarios tossed around. I think the most plausible one I heard was we try to talk to ways to, or look into ways to finance buying the infrastructure, but still having OG&E maintain it. So not necessarily trying to create our own utility, or you create an option or a low bid process. So OG&E and OEC or anybody else who wanted into the market come through and says what they would do as our maintenance services. But the biggest thing I think is the infrastructure. If we can own the infrastructure, that's where, at least in the past, we've had federal rebates we put into place and different things that we can really get a return on our investment. But we don't own most of our infrastructure at this point, and I think that's holding us back.
Does anybody know what year we are with OEC?
I've read it, but I don't recall. It's several years.
I think it was 99, 98, 99, I think I
So
saw.
for their, what,
This
agreement?
was the last one was when they were.
2021 or something like that.
It's a few years.
And why is the term 25 years? Just because that's the way it's always.
That's the
described?
maximum.
You're allowed
The
to.
state law requires that every 25 years we go to a vote of the people. So
That's
that's
the maximum.
Because
at
it's
least
hassle
every
to do
25.
it.
Over and over again.
Right, are you proposing a vote every 5 years, or
No,
just review?
And that's what the discussion's been, is we don't, originally, I don't know if you saw online, but the discussion was, oh, let's not have a 25-year agreement. And that's been kind of transitioned to, people are okay with necessarily that as long as we have the ability to reevaluate and decide if we still want it.
So let me ask you this, Andrew, have the citizens that you've heard from, you said you've heard from many, and yourself, lobbied council on your points you're making here tonight? I mean, they're the vote, and then hearing's Tuesday.
I've met with some of council too. I've been city members. It's been all over the board of people I'm meeting with, from just average citizens to people.
Okay.
So
So I mean, I would just think that's where you have the most influence. They vote on
Absolutely.
Tuesday, and then it's a done deal.
yeah, there's definitely, and we've gotten some good insight from them as well.
I guess I'm still confused on the opt-out thing. Sorry,
On the what?
on the opt-out thing. So, if tomorrow the city got froggy and said, we don't want OG&E to provide power in Norman, can they do that? Or can you guys go, we have a year and a few months left? Because, and the reason I asked that, I'll explain my reasoning why I'm confused, is because you mentioned earlier there really isn't an opt-out clause, it's just kind of there. So, is it that, I mean, it truly in five, basically I'm saying, do we need an opt-out clause? Or can the city in 5 years do it themselves and say, yeah, this isn't working for us, we don't want to do this anymore? I mean, is that,
I think the thing that has to happen is if you say OG&E leave town, what do you replace? I mean, we got people here that buy electricity that's the lifeblood of the city.
oh no, I'm totally with you. I mean, and so,
So what's the,
let's be in the matrix for just a second,
Okay.
and like all that's taken care of. But could the city in theory say, OG&E tomorrow cease operations in the city? And let's just pretend everything else is taken care of.
I don't know that they could do, I don't know.
Okay, and that's fair.
Because, you know, what complicates it is, we have an agreement with 47,000 customers, a contract, that we're gonna provide electricity, and we're gonna do this, so, I don't know if that gets voided, and, I mean, I don't wanna say, because I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm in over my head already with that, so.
It's not a simple solution here at all. There's a lot to evaluate. So.
But some of the things that are on your mission, I think you can get those things done. And I think OG&E, OEC, AT&T, Cox Cable are gonna be your partners to let that get done. You know, you gotta do your wireless communication, your, getting your solar energy to the meter on the customers. I think that's gonna happen, through one of the utilities that you have, that has the means and the methods to get that done. I would hate to think you gotta duplicate and redo something that's 90-something years old, been building for 90-something years, and then go. There's gotta be a real big technology shift.
Right.
To let that happen. But I think you got partners that are willing, ready. If the city wants to do a project, any kind of project you wanna do, we sit down, we figure out what we're gonna do, we take it to the corporation commission and get it approved. And we go from there. That's how it works. If the citizens wanna do it, we sit down, we figure out how and what, and we go up the street and we get it done.
Is the opt-out a I mean, would the opt-out be mutual termination clause?
You mean at OG&E wanted
Fairness
to opt
both
out?
Parties? Yeah, I mean.
Oh, if they want
and
to
I'm
opt out
not-
too?
I know, like, the contracts that I work with, we have mutual termination clause, you know, with clause, 7 days notice, and we can part ways.
In theory, it could be, but you made a great
Yeah.
point why OG&E wouldn't want to leave.
Well, and it, yeah.
Well, you know, it's also
It's
important.
complicated, yeah.
I guess I'm talking too much.
I think one of my concerns with the 5-year thing is I'm not asking you to talk, but one of the things James mentioned was a bunch of investment into the city's grid, right, in the last year or so. You know, just quick math, 10, 15, $20 million, something like that. So if we're at year 4 of 5, and something happens that requires them to invest $10 million into that, as a business decision at that point, are they going to be willing to invest that $10 million knowing that
We could opt out.
we could opt out in a year and then all of a sudden what happens? Because once they invest it, obviously, if we opt out, there's going to be some compensation back, but it won't be that full, that full amount. And so that's why I get kind of weary of that. And to kind of go back to James' point, you know, our job here as the board is more of that environmental side. So I'm totally on board with the concern on the chemicals and whatnot, and I'm on board with the renewables by both, you know, by leaps and bounds. But the chemicals seem like it's a city council ordinance issue, and the renewables are more if the citizenry wants to buy into them, or if the city wants to enter into an agreement to make that part of whatever they get and all that kind of stuff.